welcome back to our IRHSP painting series part 10. Last week we had done a little bit of our base blushing. You can see on our color map we used the crimson color, which is a really pretty color. Just to refresh your memory, that's a gorgeous color. It has more of that cooler undertone to it, but the application method was the key in creating more of a base or very subtle beginning to it. That way when you build your layers, it's going to really help your other layers pop. So how are we going to do that? This week we're going to do an actual wash. Yeah, you heard it. We're doing a wash. We have the option of using liquid thin, and we have the option of using your thinner. You can use one or the other. You can combine them. They do work side by side. So what I decided to do, I had gone ahead and I had made some washes. I've got our red, yellow, and blue washes using only the primary colors that Irresistibles has. This one's gonna need a little remixing, and so I can show you how to do that. And I'll show you the yellow. Here's our yellow, very pretty, and the blue, very nice. The difference between using your washes and using the liquid thin is going to be consistency and how workable and how easy it is to control the paint. When you're working with your liquid thin, it is much more suspended, so you're able to do all of those details a lot easier. You can do your model, you can do your texture, you can do everything with the liquid thin, but I wanted to show you what doing just a wash with the IRHSP colors would look like. I know we touched on it before, but we're going to jump into that today. Now, with this little peanut, we had applied our base layer of blushing, building some gorgeous color tones. You can already see the difference between the flange and her head itself. Beautiful coloring coming through, lots of texture. But now we want to give her an extra bump of color to give her a little bit more pop. We're going to move on and we're going to do a round of our yellow IRHSP. Let me show you real quick. With the IRHSP primary colors, very pigmented, so you don't need a lot. A little goes a long way. When I mixed this, the mixing ratios for washes are typically a 1 to 3 part ratio or even 4 part ratio. So I do quite a bit more of your thinner with your pigment versus having that 1-to-1 ratio like I would typically do when I'm using my liquid thin. Fantastic product, by the way. When we're doing washes, you have the option of doing a couple different techniques with the washes. All of you advanced people, you could probably skip right over this because you know plenty about washes. Washes are very basic and a very easy way to build up your coloring quickly. With washes, I usually apply them by using my 3/4 inch oval mop brush. This one is the Master's Touch. I really like this one because this had originally had white bristles, and after having used them on my colors, I've now created my little rainbow of brushes that are dedicated for those specific colors, so I'm not cross-contaminating my colors as I go. And then the thinner that we had used for this one, and I had switched to using the Equal House. I was using the Mona Lisa, which I found totally fine. There was nothing wrong with it. When Esther with Irresistibles had introduced us to the Eco House at our previous class at the last doll show, I fell in love with it. It has such a sweet smell or scent. My mother would yell at me if I said smell. Some people will find that it probably is going to be too sweet for them or too pungent. I've had some people comment that it's a little too strong of a scent for them, but I find it very mild. It's a very sweet citrus smell. I absolutely love it. It works quite well. So with this one, that is what we did. We ended up doing a 1 to about 2 to 3 parts ratio. So 1 part pigment to 2 to 3 parts of your thinner. When I'm making my colors, I will use 1/4 inch flat brush. These are really cheap mixing brushes. You can get them off Amazon. And again, I'll put all the links for everything in the description below when we're done. What I find the most helpful when creating your washes, especially when you're picking up your pigment out of your jar, or if you don't want to have too much paint on your brush that might be left behind, and when you go to use it, you end up getting that color transfer. I will put in my thinner in the jar first. I will add usually like a 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce of my thinner, depending on how much I'm pre-mixing. And then I will dip my brush into that thinner, so that way my brush can pick up the pigment a little easier and mix it a lot nicer. It's a personal preference. There isn't a right or wrong way for doing that, but this is just something that works for me. Yellow is one of those colors that you have to be careful with, because if you mix it too strong, which this is pretty strong looking, but I will show you on our color map what it looks like in a minute. It is a very soft color that will complement all of your other colors. It'll kind of tie everything together. For this particular baby, I want to give her a little bit more richness to her skin tone. If we were going to go with our primary colors, had I chose to go with a blue next, that would neutralize those warmer tones that she's got underneath. Had I gone with the red, it would pull out that red a little bit too much. I don't want it to get too red too quick. So I wanted to make sure that our base blushing wouldn't get washed out. So by adding that yellow wash, I'm gonna pull everything together. I want to warm her up a little bit. I don't want her to get too cool. I'm gonna keep that beautiful skin tone going, and that is what we're gonna do. Let's add it to our color map before I forget, and then that way I can show you just what it looks like, and then we'll talk about mixing. You can see here how thin it actually is. I mean, it's not that bright. Once that bakes, it's going to look very nice and translucent, add a little richness. Okay, when we're going to be mixing our washes using our primary colors, this one being your IRHSP primary yellow, I will take a 1/4 inch flat brush and do 1 swipe. 1 swipe on one side of a 1/4 inch flat brush is 1 part. Your thinner would be about a 1/4 ounce. I love these jars because I can see exactly how many ounces I have in my jar. So it's very easy to automatically know exactly how much thinner you need to add and how much you need to add of your pigment to equal this beautiful yellow coloring. This particular one is about a 1 to 3 ratio. I ended up adding a little bit more thinner to it only because I had played around with it. Let's get started. What you're gonna need is a 3/4 inch mop brush. I'm going to assume that you guys have already created your washes on your own, so we're going to jump right into our technique. Today we're going to be doing a technique where it's simply applying your color and then using your cosmetic wedge to absorb the excess pigment that's left behind. When we apply our wash, we're going to use a technique where it's very simple, it's very easy. You can see how nicely it goes on and how it's not as dark or shocking as you thought it might have been. But look at how those colors just come through and really just richen up. It's so pretty. When I'm applying my washes, I start at the base of the neck, working towards the face. However, I don't do the ears. I'll go underneath the neck through the top of the head, drawing that towards the face. You're basically applying the wash as if you're encompassing the face. So that way, if you have a little bit too much or an excess amount of pigment left on your brush, you don't have this pooling of paint sitting on the face and then getting too thick in the creases, and then you got to deal with that issue. So by applying the pigment from the back towards the front, you're alleviating that risk. Now here's the other thing. Because we don't want to lose all of that pretty coloring that we had put down and we want to complement that base blushing, we're going to avoid those areas, and then we'll blend them out so they'll be just softened a little bit. We will go over the brow bone, leaving that forehead. I'm going to go down the nose, down the lip, and the top of the chin. We're going to go on the cheek, just on the sides through here. If you're using a different kit and you have more raised areas, you can hit those. As with the ears, we're going to use our round brush to hit a couple of key areas. One, I always do layers upon layers on the inside canal. That helps build the depth in the ear, but soften the other layers that are left there. It will not lighten your colors. Don't be fooled in thinking that if you put down a lighter color, it will make your kit lighter. The more layers you put down, the darker the kit will get. So you want to make sure that you're applying your colors in very thin layers. All right, so I'm gonna put it right in through there. The other key areas I'll do is I will go right on this portion through here, the top over here, and we're gonna go a little bit through the top of the ear here. You can go past the ridge there, but you don't necessarily have to. I'm going to hit the edge of the ear up through here, as we want this to be a little lighter, and then just down there. Moving to the other ear, we're going to do the same thing. I don't need to pick up more color because I still have an excess amount on my brush, so I've got plenty. Hitting that top area, I'm going to go around the edge, top of the ear in there, and then we're going to hit the top of the ear, or the edge of the ear. I'm going to do a little bit more on that side. All right, that's looking good. The other area I want to hit for this one is right below the lip, but not on the lip and not right under the lip, just a hair below it. Once you get your first layer applied, you're going to take your cosmetic wedge, and Irresistibles has these wedges. These ones have latex. These are not the latex free sponges. They're definitely one that absorbs color more than having it sit on the surface. Like if you compare the density of a latex free sponge to one that does have latex, this one has much more of a spongy feel, where this one has much more of a dense feel. So these are great for when you're creating all of your texture and your model sponges and things of that nature. But if you want to just absorb color, great way to go. If you're sensitive to latex, go ahead and use a regular cosmetic wedge. But then what I would do is I would tear off the end of your cosmetic wedge so you have a little bit of a texture left behind, because you don't want a stamp looking mark. They're so squishy that it's not going to matter. I'm going to go back and forth absorbing that excess pigment that might be laying on the surface, or that excess thinner, because we don't want anything pooling in any particular area. And using the corner or the edge of your cosmetic wedge, get behind the ear real good. Now remember, we did not do the back of the ears, and there is a purpose for that, so we'll get to that later. I'm going to go through the top of the head, just around, doing our perimeter that we established. I did miss right through here. And the bottom of the jaw. I don't think I mentioned that. If you missed a particular area, don't worry, it's not going to be critical. It's just one of those things that help emphasize different things. All right, we are good. Now, in order to blend out our yellow on our face, we're gonna take our dry brush, do a very light pouncing on the edges of that yellow. That'll soften up where the yellow begins and the red ends. So that way you have a little bit more of a area that has retained some of that base blushing that we've left behind. Going around, I'm going to hit the edges of the cheek, going up through the laugh line. If you feel like it got too much, use a clean side of your cosmetic wedge use that to kind of dab away some of that excess yellow. See how it leaves that nice radiance or iridescence to it? It looks really pretty when it's done. Keep dry brushing, going around the edge. If you need to wipe it on the counter with your dry brush, go for it. I try not to do that with like my paintbrushes when I'm using those, but if I'm doing dry brushing, I will oftentimes wipe those on the counter. Hitting that area and the top of the lip. I'm going to use my cosmetic wedge and absorb some of this. So I want to have the bridge of the nose have a soft yellow to it, but I don't want it to get too yellow. Okay. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. If you have any pigment or thinner or paint, whatever you want to call it, pooling in any crease, make sure you hit those areas before you bake it. Otherwise, those areas will have a tendency to crack because the pigment or the paint is applied too thickly. I'm going to hit my brush on the inside of the ear. Just a little bit, soften out the edges, and that looks good. I think I want to add just a touch more on this side of our yellow, and then I'll blend that out just a little bit. And this is where you got to go in and do your tweaking, where you want to see more yellow in a particular area, add a little more yellow, and then dry brush the excess out, or use a clean cosmetic wedge to absorb some of that. So that way you have more of an iridescent look where you are enhancing your base blushing without canceling it out. Does that make sense? All right, we're gonna move on to the limbs. We're gonna do only one leg and one arm like we always have for the sake of time. So your homework would be to finish the other leg and arm, and then after we complete this round, you will go ahead and bake it. And that is at 265 degrees for 10 minutes, making sure that you're monitoring your oven with an oven thermometer the entire time. Don't step away from it or throw it in there and just expect it to be at the right temperature. All right. As for the leg, this one is going to be fairly simple. However, you have to be very careful because it's very easy to apply too much color and have it pool in all of those creases. We've got a lot more creases on our limb. You can do either of two things. If you're very careful, you can go ahead and continue using your mop brush, or you can use your mixing brush. I'm going to stick with my mop brush, being very, very careful. Once I apply it to my brush, I do it one time for both limbs, and then I'll dip my brush one more time for both arms. I don't dip each time. With the leg, we're gonna do everything from just below the flange or the top of the thigh, around the knee. We're basically going to be doing everything that we did not do our base blushing on, including the foot. There will be key areas on the foot, but not the whole foot. So starting with the top of the thigh, it's gonna go right in that center portion and around the knee. We'll draw it in here a little bit. Here, gonna go around a little bit. This yellow, I can draw it out a little bit through the calf. I'm not gonna go right in the crease. Go right that way. And remember, we drew our base blushing kind of down the leg, so keep that in mind. I will do a little bit on the back of the heel. And then we have to get a smaller brush. This is where you can pick up your very small detail round brush, whatever is comfortable for you. Taking your brush, and when you pick up your color, so you don't have too much color applied to the limb too quickly, I always will pick up the color and then just tap it on my sponge. I can always wring out the excess paint back into my jar, where if I just put it right on the limb, I'm gonna have more risk of having pooling happen, which will cause issues with your curing, and it can also looking muddy or dirty. I'm gonna hit in between those areas we blushed. So not necessarily in the crease, but kind of below and above the crease, just a tiny bit. not the whole foot. I will go in through like the knuckle of the toe through there. And I'm gonna go through the knuckle there. And just a little bit on the top of the foot. As for the bottom, I'm only gonna do a little bit. Do those areas that were a little bit more raised. All right, that's all I'm gonna do for my leg. With this one, I'm gonna start off with my sponge, being careful that we don't apply the coloring or have it bleed into our base blushing. Picking up that color. This is basically reverse painting. You're painting only the areas that you want to see certain undertones or what have you, and then blending those out so that they enhance the other colors. You don't do this for every layer, but this is what we are doing for this layer. All right, we got a good portion of that yellow taken care of. I'm gonna need a couple of dry brushes for this one. Starting with the back of the leg, I'll tap out the top of the leg, all of those areas where I want it to blend. And when you're tapping it out, make sure that you're pulling the color away from those areas, not towards it. That way you can retain that base blushing that you did. A little bit behind the leg. Behind the knee. Hit the folds of the creases a little bit here. With the top of the foot, we're going to switch it out to a smaller brush. Tapping the edges out through here. This one's really tricky because your foot wants to move so much. By the ankle. Opposite side. All right, that looks good. Very, very nice. Hopefully I didn't float out of the camera, so sorry about that if I did. So move on to the next leg on your own time. And then as for the hand, we have two different hands I'll just quick touch base on because we have an open and closed hand. With this one, we're gonna hit between the areas that we did our base blushing, not in the crease, not on the blushing, but just between. So very, very lightly on the palms of the hand, and then underneath the knuckles between the two creases or between your two knuckles. For your closed hand, you don't necessarily have to worry about it so much, but you do want to get it right in that edge through here and on the edge of the hand right in through here by the wrist, and a little bit on the tops of the knuckle through there. And the rest will be similar to that. Now, I did not pick up any additional color to do the rest of the limbs here. I'm using what was left on the brush, and I am painting selectively. Okay. I'm gonna have to go in with a smaller brush for those areas. Being careful not to bump anything. If you're more comfortable using a dowel in your limb while you're doing this, by all means, certainly do that. Otherwise, like right now, I've got my finger all the way into the limb, trying to give it some good stability. As you can see, as I'm pouncing, a little bit of that pigment is bleeding into the areas that we don't really want to have the yellow, but that's okay. I'll dry brush them out, and you can always pick it up with a clean wedge, which I don't have, but I do have one that's torn, so I can go through those areas and do that. So you can either use, like I said, your torn cosmetic wedge, make sure it's a clean one, not the one that you've been using to absorb all the color initially, to go around the edges, or use your dry brushes. And because there's such small areas, this comes in handy. Now I'm going to go in with our smaller brush. I'm going to hit a little bit on the inside of the hand. Only the areas we didn't do our base blushing. Think of yellow again as the cartilage or the fatty tissue. When the limb is bent or moving, it's pushing that blood in the other direction. So the higher parts or the fatty parts are going to have more of a yellow undertone appearance to it. Right up through the tops of the knuckle here. That's about it. That looks good. Nice. So move on to the other arm on your own. I have not baked the head or anything yet, but I will show you what it looks like now that it's been completely flashed. You can see how nicely that coloring gave it so much richness and depth to it without taking away from the base blushing that we've already applied. So that's looking really good. I really like that. This is something you have to be patient with and trust the process. So we're doing good. We've got lots of beautiful colors already on there. So you guys finish up the other arm and leg. Once you do that layer, preheat your oven to 265 degrees, then bake it for 10 minutes. Make sure that you guys are in a well-ventilated area as well. Someone had mentioned that in one of the videos. When you're done, make sure to check back. If you guys have not subscribed yet and you're enjoying these videos, make sure you do so and hit the little bell so that you get notified when I upload the next video. Thank you to Irresistibles for sponsoring today's video, and to all of you guys for watching. If you haven't joined our channel, make sure you check out our memberships. You won't be able to view it on a phone or a TV. You are able to see the membership information from your desktop. I don't know why they do it that way, but that's just the way it is. But come join, hang out, paint with us, make some friends, show off your work. I love it. You guys are fantastic, and I so appreciate you guys supporting me and all that we do. And I will see you guys all again soon. Bye-bye.